What's going on, Refresh.Church? This is Adam. I'm with the digital team here at the Refresh.Church, and I'm with TJ Hankey, lead pastor. TJ, how's it going today?
It is going amazing, loving every day, living in God's country.
Perfect. And for those of you that are wondering what in the world we're doing here, we're going week by week as we get ready to launch a brand new church, Refresh.Church, in the Treasure Valley area. And TJ and I are walking through a myriad of different things that range from how did we get here in the Boise, the greater Treasure Valley area? What are we doing? How do we find and select today? How do we actually end up picking Treasure Valley area? And how are we going to find somewhere to actually hold a church amidst a pandemic that's recovering, right? Amidst a whole other things. You've never been to Boise in your life outside of maybe a visit or two. And also we'll cover a whole bunch of things that'll be extremely useful for those of you who are church planning yourselves in the coming weeks that range from technology, how to pick your tech, how to roll that out, how to attract people that when you're in places you don't even know, you don't know people, you start from scratch. And then all the way down to how to run logistics. I'm sure, TJ, you got operationalized from your previous adventure, planting a church, and you can bring a lot of insight for that for everyone across the world, really. But for today, we're talking about why the Treasure Valley. You know, how did God end up leading you to here? I know we touched on that on episode 1 of basically we'll name this church planning podcast later. And you talked about some of the ways that God moved you through your life as a youth pastor in Florida, moving you to California, moving you back to Florida to start a church, and now into the Treasure Valley area. TJ, how did you get to Boise in the Treasure Valley area to start with?
Yeah, to me, it's a close, special story. But it's really interesting for other people. They're like, the dots never connect. They go, Ohio, Iowa, no, Idaho. But why are you going to the Midwest? I'm not going to the Midwest. It's Idaho. And so even like you said, the Treasure Valley is an incredible area, but people go, where's that? It's the Boise metro area. But if I say I live in Eagle, they're like, where's that? You know, but people have heard of Boise at least. And it's really interesting because people always ask, why so rural? But when you show up here, it's like, nah, y'all, we got a major college, we have Target, we have Chick-fil-A. I mean, we got everything you can need, Costco. It's amazing what we get to do here and how we get to live. So the question people go, okay, but how? How on earth does a kid that's born and raised in Florida have Boise, Idaho, the Treasure Valley on their heart? And to be honest with you, we were just doing road trips as a family and just enjoying being out west, mountains, just a different scenery than the beaches and palm trees we'd normally get in Sarasota. And we'd just head out west. We'd go to California, we'd go to Colorado, we'd go to Utah, whatever it was. And then one day I was looking at a map and I really felt like the Holy Spirit just kind of whispered, hey, look up Boise. And I'm not like this kind of person that hears from God every day and it's like the audible voice. It's just like an impression on my heart that was, hey, do this, look it up. So I'm on my iPad, look it up. I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's a cool city, looks great. Maybe we'll stop by. And we were going to Park City, Utah that summer anyway. In fact, I was meeting you and your wife, Amy, there in Park City. And we kind of snuck away. A couple days afterwards, we just 2 nights drove around the city. And you know what? It was awesome. It was amazing. We were like, wow, this is a really cool place. But we didn't feel that, this is our destiny sort of moment. So we thought, okay, God's put it on our heart for a reason. We just don't know what it is. And there's a story I like to tell on that opening day that we were there, here actually in this area, that at the time didn't feel like a significant sort of life-changing moment. But when I look back on it now, I kind of go, okay, there was more there than I realized. Maybe I wasn't sharp. Maybe I wasn't listening for the voice of God that day. I don't know. I just missed something. But since we were on such a long road trip, I was getting an oil change. And I sat in the lobby of this oil change station. And the guy next to me was getting his oil change as well. He noticed I had a Florida plate. And he goes, man, you're way out of your way, right? And I said, yeah, no. He's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, vacation, road trip. And of course, he's in sales and he's talking to me and talking about all the great areas and why he loves living here and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, so what do you do? And every pastor is like, man, if I'm a pastor and this guy wants free counseling, I'm about to give this guy an entire oil change worth of free counseling. And so you kind of have this choice you need to make. And I decided not to lie. I said, I'm a pastor, I did all these, like not lying as a pastor is good. How pastors are always like, okay, I'm gonna tell you the truth. And it's like, have you been lying this whole time but up to this point? So, but I said, I'm a pastor. And he goes, really? He goes, I'm not, he was not a Christian. You could tell he was not a Christian. He had no intention of becoming a Christian. And he just had no relationship with God, the church, anything else. But it's funny because he asked me question after question after question. He was just a curious person. And as he's asking these questions, there's a lady across the way who had been in a church. The church was struggling. Her faith was kind of struggling. She didn't want to give up on going to church, but she didn't have any positive relationships in the church she was in. She needed an incredible community. And then she starts talking to me. She's like, I didn't mean to eavesdrop on your conversation, but I am looking for a church. Do you know of any? And I was like, well, I have been here for 18 hours. So no, I do not know of any churches in the area. I'm just on vacation, passing through, don't know a soul. And then after she says something, the guy behind the counter that's working at the oil change place, he goes, I just moved here. I'm looking for a good church. Can you guys help me find one? And I'm like, my goodness. I'm like, I'm just a pastor over here minding my business, getting my oil changed. And people are like asking me for direction, asking me. And in that one lobby, there's someone who needs Jesus, someone who needs to grow in their faith and their relationship with others, and someone who's new to town looking for a body of believers to be a part of. And looking back, I was like, it, at the time it didn't feel significant, but looking back, it feels like, oh my gosh, God showed me the three types of people that I need to come and reach in this city: people that don't know him, people that are struggling in their relationship with him, and people that are new looking for a body of believers to be a part of. And so we got to this place because of great needs. At the time, again, we moved here out of obedience, not even knowing what that need was until we looked back with the eyes of faith and looked back at like, okay, here's a good place. Now, with all of that story sort of told, there's some statistics that kind of back this up too. And some of us are nerdy and we love statistics. So I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. Statistic time. Let's go. Did you know that 10% of the Treasure Valley, our hometown, our area, goes to church on a Sunday morning, a gospel church on a Sunday? 10%, which means 90% of people are not going to church at all, which is a lower church attendance rate than almost every other city in the entire United States, lower than some of the most famous cities that are unchurched, lower than Seattle, lower than Boston, lower than Las Vegas, lower than so many areas. And so this area has an incredible need for life-giving gospel churches just based on that one statistic alone. So you add in the fact also that there's fast growth and the numbers just keep stacking up. And the statistics are pointing right now that this area is going to be over 1 million people by the year 2030. It's growing so fast. And this area needs 250 new churches of 200 people to maintain the 10% attendance. Those are incredibly silly numbers when you really think about the way this place is growing, the way this place has been traditionally not gospel saturated. So we showed up. We didn't, honestly, we got here knowing we were supposed to be here, but not knowing why. And that's such a weird place to be in. It's like, I'm here, but I don't know why. But when we got here, we figured out why.
Yeah, that makes me pause and think. Also, for those who are listening or watching, looking to plan a church, you threw out some dizzying numbers at a rate that, in all honesty, I'd be floored if God could do anything. But that's a lot of churches in a lot of very short amount of time to keep up with that pace.
Mm-hmm.
Especially to think of the Treasure Valley getting the reputation of becoming a new, almost like mini Silicon Valley tech hub. People are wanting to go there for mountain escape. For your assist, God tell them to move, right?
Yeah.
For those that are church planning and are just getting that inkling from God, or they're thinking, hey, this might be the path that God's sending me down. How did you get to those numbers? Where did you dig? Let's actually get practical and say,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
So the first thing you had to do is always be inquisitive, right? But let me be clear, it's not the numbers that brought us here. It was the calling, and the numbers came after the calling. It could have been an entirely different number structure and we would have showed up anyway. But when you want to look for statistics, when you want to look for places to dig, the first thing I always do is I ask other pastors in the area because they want to know their area too. And there's certain pastors that have no idea what any statistics are. They're just not those people. But then almost every single city has one or two pastors that have been studying. They're learners, they're growing, they're observers of the culture, and they're going, okay, here's what's happening in our city. And I found one of those guys, and he's popping out statistics like crazy, and I'm like, oh, slow down, I need to write these down. And then I add on top of that, that every 10 years you get these incredible populist studies done by the U.S. government, and we just had one that came out of 2020. Idaho is the second fastest growing state in the nation over the last 10 years at a rate of about 17%, which is crazy numbers. And it's really just incredible. And then certain websites have it too. Population Explorer is a great one. They have a free thing you can do where it's like, okay, you can draw a map or a circle around a certain area, and it's a free trial, and then you have to pay for it after a while. But if you're a church planter, you only needed it for about 2 weeks, right? Like, get everything you can out of it, and then, okay, I'll let that free trial expire. But so there's a lot of statistics out there, a lot of things. City data is another good one. Best Places is another one that I've used. And so there's all kinds of apps out there that you can really dig into. But I would suggest this before numbers, think calling. Before possibilities, ooh, it's growing, it needs more churches. Like, before any of that, God, what do you have for me? Help me fall in love with a city before I do anything else. And once you fall in love with that city, I think God will lead you in the way that you really need to go, not just based on numbers.
It's a lot better answer than mine in my head. It was just go to Twitter. You'll be good.
You just Google it.
Yeah, you're good. And so as God plops you, then obviously for a reason in the Treasure Valley, you're still unsure, and then we kind of take a jump, right? You're like, nope, we're gonna plant a church. This is it. There's a lot that goes into this, and we'll cover a lot of that in the coming weeks and months as we lead up to effectively launch date in September. But you got to find a place. And you got to find a place that's going to be open. I learned this with you going through this process back in Sarasota. That's even open to the idea of having a religious institution, a church on their grounds. There's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of no's, a lot of rejection. And then you throw in a pandemic, or we'll say we're at the tail end, or whatever this next phase is.
Yeah.
It makes things so much more difficult to find a place to hold bodies when we're wearing masks, when occupancy concerns and all of this. There's a lot. So let's start with, for you, TJ, and maybe you draw on the Sarasota experience and how it was a little bit easier or more difficult with not knowing you in the Treasure Valley. How did you find, or have you found a spot, and how did you find it, and what went into that?
So for our church plant in Sarasota, that actually came a little easier. I kind of knew the area. I knew the city because I'd been there a lot, grew up there, had a kind of a lock on the culture, knew the natural barriers of the city. Like, there's some roads that it's like, these people don't cross that road. They don't go there. But these people will go to the other side of that road. Just every city has their natural barriers. And so I knew those in Sarasota just inherently. So I knew where I wanted to be. There were two schools, a high school and a middle school. The high school wanted an incredibly high number to rent it, and it wouldn't have really worked for us to pay that much to have that much space. And so I went to the middle school, and they said, sure, that's it. They said yes, and that was it. It was just, I knew that there was one area that I wanted to be. There were two schools in the entire area, no movie theaters. And I was like, okay, well, we'll do that one school that said yes, and that's it. Like, we didn't have many choices. Now, showing up in this area, it's like, okay, God, where do you want us to launch a church? There's a lot more kind of prayer. There's a lot of questions that you need to ask. You can't just go, here's a great opportunity, without realizing the natural flows of a city. And so in our city, there's an interstate, there's a river, there's city lines, county lines. There's all kinds of almost invisible barriers. You're like, a river's not, these bridges just go over the river. But the truth is, there's a lot of people that go, yeah, I need to go around to get there, and it's just not as convenient. And there's certain parts of the city that are hard to get to from other parts of the city. So if you want to have a church location that's a little more successful, easy access, like ask yourself, if I lived 20 minutes from this location, how far away am I going to be? Well, in some cities, 20 minutes is like 5 miles. In other cities, 20 minutes is 20 miles. And so depending on your location, you just incredibly uh, you enlarged your potential area incredibly. So when you're looking for a location, it's like, okay, I got to look at the invisibles and the intangibles. And so for us in our valley, the further west you go in the valley, the more Christian it becomes. The percentages start to slope up. And the farther east you go, that tends to slope down. And there's certain school districts that are more keen on letting churches in. There's already been a precedent set, well, others have had a negative precedent set where they don't want you in. And so we started to dig and ask questions. We came to the conclusion that with COVID, movie theaters, many of them weren't open or weren't going to open back up. Uh, the density limitations, you can only have 50% occupancy. So if you have a movie theater that has 180 seats and you're only allowed to have 90 people in there, and 10 of them are in the band and 2 of them are in tech, you're gonna have to run like 16 services on a weekend. It's just, it doesn't work. They just don't, most movie theaters don't have super high capacities anymore because they're all going to these incredibly huge lounge chairs that you fall asleep in. You pay $25 for a nap now, right? And so, and a snack, but like that, it's like they're not great anymore for churches. They're not as great for as long anyway. They might be great for your location for what you're doing, but for me, it's like, okay, the that left me with two choices: event venues and schools. So our county, our school district, the precedent had been set. Churches can meet in schools. Churches have met in schools long term because some districts don't want you to do it long term. They want you to do it short term. But it's all up to the principal. And so we've got several no's in a city that is church friendly. We got no after no after no. And the reasons for the no's wide wide ranging. Some of them, there's a Mormon background in that principal, and she's like, no way. He's like, no way, not going to happen. Others have had churches in there and had a bad experience. You know, others are like, what, we just don't have the facilities for it. I mean, we're an older school, it's not going to fit. And so I got no after no after no after no until it finally came to a yes. So before I could go to the yes in the school, when it comes to event venues, we just don't have them. We don't have concert halls like we do in other cities, at least not in the area where I am, where I kind of circled on the map that was easy access, low barriers, good parking, all the things that go into a building. I didn't have that kind of event venue around. I could find a place with one room, but I need to do kids too. And so schools they checked all the boxes for us. Well, as the final school I asked said yes, and it's a school that didn't even exist yet. It was under construction. They were literally putting it together when I asked, and the principal graciously said, "You know what? First come, first serve, and you're the first. Let's do this." And I mean, I couldn't have picked a better location. I couldn't have picked better leadership in the school. This principal's amazing. I just, they're even putting in technology into this school that is mind blowing. Line array system for the audio. They're putting LED DMX run lighting. They're having comm systems, laser projector. I'm just like, God, can you pinch me? This is so great. And they're like, come on in, rent it, use it, and really just friendly to the church. And I didn't get that from all the other schools that I talked to. So finding that right fit meant a lot. And so for me, I had my choice. I said, I want to go there. And they said, no. Okay, well, I want to go to the school next to it. No. But you know what? The opportunity came for this place, and it's perfect. It really is. So yeah, that's what our story kind of looked like.
And for those following along at home, again, going back to those who might be planning a church or thinking about it, where did you start with? What person did you have to just kind of go and find the principal? Did you learn that eventually the principal is the person that's going to make the decisions, so you're just going to go for them, or is there a kind of chain command? What does that look like for
Mhm.
you as you started out?
Yeah. So every school district is going to be different. In ours, the principal has the yes and the no. And so I first reached out to the district and I said, hey, uh, I'd love to rent a school, planting a church. Can you tell me what schools might be available and how I'd go about going through this process? They let me know. You have to contact the individual school and find the person that's in charge of leasing that facility. And the principal has the final say, but they're not always the one that is doing the negotiations. So there's usually someone writing contracts and doing all that that's in charge of the scheduling. I figured if it's the person who has the final yes or no is the principal, I'm going to reach out to the principal. And if they decide it's a yes, their contract person's going to work it out on their behalf, right? So that's kind of what I took. Some areas though, I have friends not too far away from where I live. They got a yes from the principal, but the district said no. So everywhere's just a little different, and you just kind of roll with the punches. Got to check it out.
And did you have someone available on your side as far as legal help with contracts, or were you able to pretty much sort that out on your own?
Yeah, they have a pretty standard form in our district. So there is, even if I wanted to negotiate, there's no negotiating. They're like, this is the price, take it or leave it. Those are your two options. And so, but I know with like event venues, there's definitely I would recommend getting another set of eyes on it. Just someone who's keen, wise business. I would have an insurance company take a look at it, because all of us church planters should carry an insurance policy that we can name them as an additionally insured, that we can have I think it's called a land and sea policy, where it covers all the equipment in your trailer if it's stolen or damaged in any capacity, for those of us doing portable church. Yeah. So I would definitely have someone who's kind of savvy with business, and then an insurance person look at every contract you do.
That makes sense. My day job, I deal with events and all of that too. So I'm
Good
always
point.
curious. Okay, let's protect our necks just in
Yes.
case.
No, it's a great question.
Um,
It's not something that a lot of people think of very often.
it's bitten a few of my colleagues and peers in the past. So I
Yeah.
always want to be cognizant of that.
Mhm.
There's a lot that goes with a facility. And one of the most surprising things for me back in Sarasota was how well we got to know the on-site staff. Not
For
necessarily
sure.
attending, but like you figure what we were there how many times a week during the night, on the
Mhm.
weekends, on Sundays. There's people doing grounds work,
Yep.
taking care of the facilities, and even though they didn't always come to church on Sunday,
Yep.
they were there opening up. We were incredibly friendly. It's one of my fondest things of like I did not expect this to happen, and here it is.
Yeah.
For you, you have a little different perspective. Obviously, it was your church. What was the most surprising thing for you opening up a church plant in a school? And it could be anything. Like
Mhm.
what caught you off guard the most?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough question because every year holds something different in a portable church. Like you said, the custodial stuff, getting really close to them was I it was interesting. I never thought that they would be interested in what we were doing. And honestly, none of them came to the church, but we were interacted with them a lot. So we got to have that gospel presence through who we were. It was very sort of a incarnational sort of a thing, if you want to speak like that. I was surprised at some of the teachers we got to know. They didn't come to our church, but when you start leaving Starbucks cards behind for letting us use their classroom, they're like, I like this guy. And I'd run into them periodically in the community, or when they're leaving school, kind of bumping into them on a Friday night, because that's when we did set up at our school in Sarasota, Florida, and getting to know their kids' names and getting to interact with them a little bit more, and understanding what they like and understanding what kind of irritates them, was those relationships were really cool. Um, Probably one of the most surprising things though was the attitude people had towards a portable church. And especially when it came to age demographics and their willingness to walk in a portable setting versus a permanent setting. Um, we found that there's an entire group of people that were like, you know what, you're not a real church till you get a building. That came from every age group, but predominantly from the 40 plus. And maybe it's just a different mindset because of the way the world worked, a decade before I was, born, like that age and the older, but we did get a portable, or we went from portable to permanent. We had a revival of retirees in our church start to come. Even though we were loud, we were young, we had smoke and moving lights, they started to come because they loved the fact that there was young people and kids there. And so our church balanced out like across the board. We had everybody present in the permanent setting, but the portable, it was a little different. It was a little surprising in that regard. And then the second thing with that, the attitude towards a portable facility is I kept hearing the same phrase. This is pretty good for a school. It's pretty good for a school. And it made me realize people are walking in with extremely low expectations, which is actually a really good thing. Now, it'll keep some people away, but it doesn't take a lot of effort to kind of blow someone's mind in a portable setting. They're going to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they do this every week. I can't believe they converted this and made it into like a real church. It's awesome. But also it's a double-edged sword, because when you go into a permanent facility, they're going to go, oh, I cannot wait to see what they do. My expectations are way up here now, when you make that jump. So
I mean, I expected that too, and well, thankfully we did it. I mean, and it's so funny that people, even in just coming to a church, have that pre-qualify things. It's something I struggle with in the corporate side of my normal life, is that we go through such extensive training to remove unconscious bias, and that, I mean, let's call it for what it is. It's qualifying unconsciously whether or not this is going to be a great experience because of X, Y, or Z. Which is always, I mean, it's the human condition.
it is.
But when you do things with excellence, when you focus on doing a few things great instead of being a jack of all trades, I think you and I have both seen dividends on how that pays out effectively, right?
Oh, yeah.
Save for the meltdowns that everyone that's ever done a church has, whether it's the sounds, the AC, and I think I sweat through 3 shirts that morning, or even heaven forbid, the drums going a 5,000 clicks off beat on the intro of a song. It happens, but hey, like, at the end of the day, what are we doing it for? We're doing it to give glory to God, right?
Yep.
And even if it's, even if it's in the midst of a heat wave, it's sweating, and there's just no rhythm, it's still a good thing.
I think I can. Just keep trucking, man.
Yeah, and I think also going back a little bit to just the relationships you build with the people that are there running the facilities.
Yeah.
It really goes to show that starting and planning a church isn't just confined to Sunday. The impact and the lasting, we'll say, reverberations of what you do, what we do as a church body, as collectively across the world, impacts everyone around you. And if you had told 25-year-old Adam that, hey, if you left a Starbucks gift card and make sure to put the yellow pencils in the yellow pencil jar like a teacher wants, you'll have a pretty cool relationship with that person, I would have been blown away, right? And how many people don't think of things like even a $5 Starbucks gift card? We were flinging those out like crazy, right?
Like candy, like they're candy.
Like candy. And it made to where we didn't have to worry about causing friction, which is important. But then B, also, like, at the end of the day, we're doing what God called us to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Love through actions. What's the most frustrating thing you ran into now? You had surprising. What's the one frustrating thing you could go back and say, hey, young TJ, don't do that, or let's avoid that next time? What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, you can't win with everyone. That's a big one. I mean, you're not going to win every heart every time. There's going to be no's. And there's always a gatekeeper in every single school or facility you try to get to. And that's usually the person who answers phones, the personal assistant or secretary or someone. There's a gatekeeper, and one of their jobs is to keep people away from the principal, the owner, the whatever, because there's just some people just hassle you, sales or whatever. There's a certain list that they're on the never let them through list, right? And I'm pretty sure church planters are on some of those lists. Like, do not let them in. In our school in Florida, that individual that was a gatekeeper, um, we're struggling with the gatekeeper, and we said, you know what, man, we are paying a lot of money. The AC doesn't always work. It's difficult to, have church and not have like cleanliness, like just some things. In the summer, the roaches, bro, they were just like, they did not have enough to eat and they were coming out hunting. It just was nasty. And we're like, please, please, please. And she told me, she said straight up, she goes, I'm an atheist. I don't care if you make it. Just straight up, like, did not give two rips about how much we had to pay, whether we had AC or not, whether we were being hunted by eight-legged demons. Like, she did not care. And it was like, okay. So there's more to it than just greasing the gears. There's probably some spiritual warfare in there too, and some people that just do not give two rips about you whatsoever. And actually, they're kind of rooting for your demise. So yeah, hurtful, surprising, whatever you want to call it. It's a challenge.
Okay, I thought you were personally attacking me for a second. Then it's like, oh no, okay, good. You didn't call me out by name on that one. Yeah, it's always, regardless of, I think you choose this life, you choose the church planting life, you're gonna naturally run into those types of situations, and it's not easy. And it really tests you as terms of metaphor can literally turn the other cheek and showing Christ's love. And I think hats off to you, man. Now, with as I'm keeping an eye on things as we're wrapping up, as you know, we'll keep the trend. Let's get a takeaway in here for thinking about what we discussed today, recapping, right? Why the Treasure Valley? How to select a location if you're being called to leave where you're at, or even if you're at, how do you figure that out? And then also selecting a building. There's a few key things that you touched on that I'll make sure to try and grab in the notes and the comments section. But I'll give you 2 minutes. If you could round the best bits of info you have from today, what would that be?
Okay, so here's one thread that'll pull it all together for us, whether it's people you're working with, schools you're talking to, people you're trying to recruit onto your team. Make them say yes or no. I know so many times I've talked myself out of asking the question because I believed they were going to say no before I ever asked. So I decided, well, if they're just going to say no, I'm not even going to ask. But you can't say no for people. You invite them to your launch team meetings. You invite them to your church. You ask the question, can I rent your school for a church? Can I have on-site storage? And I know people are going, but oh, that's too much. Listen, let them say no. Say everything is negotiable here. Here's the world that I'm asking for. If it's too much, tell me which parts are too much, And in some cases, that's actually a pretty great negotiating tactic to start really high and work your way down. But I would say this to every church planter: don't say no for them. I would say that to every Christian inviting a friend to church or winning people for Christ: don't say no for them. Ask the question. The results are not up to you. That's up to the Holy Spirit. It is your job to put the question out there.
And for those that are uncomfortable with forcing that, because it's not everyone's gift, it's not everyone's strength, and
it is certainly
sometimes
not
a learned muscle. Unless it's something I really want. But that's one of the best books that I was able to read is Never Split the Difference. I think you've read this too, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And that really helped me and to understand that it isn't always a selfish thing to push for something, right? And this is a perfect case where getting to the yes and you need to know quick saves that person time, it saves you time.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe you could capitalize on saving that time into something like your situation where you're able to snag first come, first serve in a brand new facility, right? Is there any other resources that you've come across that helped you to learn how to push through some of those roadblocks, and not even necessarily just uh, a lack of urgency, but rather just that's not the personality, right?
Right. Yeah. I would say desperation is a church planter's best friend. And don't wait for time to make you desperate. Let the burden of the calling make you desperate. Um, because you need these things to start a church. You can't hope they happen. You pray, you hope, but you do as well. And so if you're praying and saturating and soaking and seeding in the spiritual, but you never take action on it, I think you're missing half of it. And if you're only taking action and you're not soaking and seeding and praying and winning the war in the spiritual, you're only doing half it. You need both sides of it. So that is huge to those of us who are maybe less inclined to push the envelope a little bit, ask the question, just get an answer. Like, hey, what do you think? Yes or no? And if you do it too soon, it's kind of a little rude. But if you linger, it's wasting your energy and theirs. So that's one thing I would say. And then for the rest of us, we always need a coach. Like, it doesn't matter how experienced you are, it doesn't matter how good you are. I was telling a group of pastors earlier today, I'm like, when it comes to church planting, even though I'm doing it now for a second time, the things that are hard to do are still hard to do. It doesn't matter if I've already done this before. The hardest parts are still the hardest. And it's still uncomfortable. Uncomfortable conversations are still uncomfortable. There's gonna be moments, but now I know through great coaching, through great friendships, through great relationships that we can do this.
Well put. I think that wraps it up here. TJ, Hankey, always a pleasure hanging out. I think we've got a whole treasure chest, no semi pun intended, of content coming up in a handful of weeks and months as we lead up to effectively launch September of 2021 this year. So I'm excited to see what that is. You've got a couple key things coming up. You can find more information about Refresh Church on www.refresh.church. Wow, that's so easy. Otherwise, find us on Instagram. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell so you get all of our great new content. TJ, any final words before we cut this off?
Nope. I'm praying for those of you who are listening, whether you're in the Treasure Valley or abroad. May you plant an amazing church. May you be a part of an amazing team, and may you advance the kingdom of God eternally.
Amen. All right, TJ. Till next week.
Till next week, sir.
All right, Refresh Church fam. Thanks so much. Have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon.